political desperation in their continued obsession to manipulate mainstream media coverage. But the good news is the American people understand that this has been a partisan process from the start. The Democratic coordination with the whistleblower, the incessant and astounding leaks, the unprecedented closed-door process, closed to the majority of members, closed to the press, closed to the people, starting this inquiry without taking a vote. And then when finally forced to take a vote, the vote was with bipartisan opposition. Minutes left, I'm going to turn to our two witnesses. Thank you both for your service. Thank you, Dr. Hill, for your comments on the personal attacks. I wanted to ask you each fact-based questions. Dr. Hill, you testified that you handed over your duties on the NSC to Tim Morrison on July 15th and that you physically left the White House on July 19th, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So that means that by the time there was the July 25th call with President Trump and President Zelensky, you were no longer on the NSC, correct?
Actually, I was still technically on the payroll of the NSC until the end of August 30th of 2019. But I was not physically in the building, and I'd handed over my duties to Mr. Morrison.
And you were not on the call?
I was not on the call. That is absolutely correct.
And it's also correct that you did not participate in the preparation of talking points or the specific coordination of setting up the call?
Not for that call, but let me just say for the record that there had been a long anticipation that eventually there would be a call. So there was a call package that was prepared in advance. I just cannot say how much of that call package that had perhaps been prepared since, for example, the inauguration of President Zelensky was then used as the basic material for that call. So I did take part in the preparation of that standard call package, but I did not take part in any preparation for the specific call on July 25th.
And the first time you actually read the transcript of the call was when it was released to the public?
That's correct.
Mr. Holmes, I wanted to turn to you. Good to see you again. Thank you for mentioning the bipartisan delegation that I led on behalf of the House Armed Services Committee with my friend, Representative Anthony Brown from Maryland. We did have an exceptionally informative visit where we highlighted the bipartisan congressional support for Ukraine, in particular the importance of countering Russian aggression. And we discussed in the briefings at the embassy the importance of defensive lethal aid in the form of javelins, which, as you both, I think you stated today, is, quote, an important strategic deterrent to Russia. And I just want to highlight on the record, I know this has been asked, that javelins were provided by the Trump administration and not the Obama administration, correct?
That's correct. And I would just say, I think we discussed the importance of security assistance to Ukraine, not just the javelin.
Absolutely. All of our security assistance, which I strongly support. Again, thank you for being a host on that. Dr. Hill, turning back to you, there's been discussion about the process of scheduling the meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump. And you testified that there was hesitancy to schedule this meeting until after the Ukrainian parliamentary elections. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And that's because there was speculation in all analytical circles, both in Ukraine and outside the Ukraine, that Zelensky might not be able to get the majority that he needed to form a cabinet, correct?
That is correct.
And you also testified that another aspect of the NSC's hesitancy to schedule this meeting was based on broader concerns related to Zelensky's ability to implement anti-corruption reforms. And this was in specific relation to Ukrainian oligarchs who basically were the owner of the TV company that Mr. Zelensky's program had been a part of. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Just distilling this down to the key facts, I wanted to ask both of you three key questions. So the fact of the matter is Ukraine ultimately did receive the aid, correct, Mr. Holmes?
Ultimately.
Yes. And Dr. Hill?
Correct, ultimately.
And there was no investigation into the Bidens, correct, Mr. Holmes?
They did not open a new investigation into the Bidens.
Correct.
And
Dr. Hill?
Correct.
And there was, in fact, a meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky ultimately at the UN. Is that correct?
The president invited Zelensky to the Oval Office at a date undetermined. That has not yet happened.
The meeting President Zelensky met at the UN.
They did, but not the Oval Office.
But they did have a meeting at the UN.
They did.
And Dr. Hill, they did? Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Not enough.
Mr. Swallow. Dr. Hill, yesterday I think a lot of Americans were scratching their heads as Ambassador Sondland testified that on September 9, he calls the President of the United States and just says broadly, "What do you want from Ukraine?" And the President says, "There's no quid pro quo. There's no quid pro quo." like being pulled over for speeding and being asked, do you know how fast you're going? And saying, I didn't rob the bank. I didn't rob the bank. But your testimony today is that on July 10 of this year, you told one of the president's lawyers that you had concerns that a White House meeting was linked to investigations. Is that right?
That's correct, based on what Ambassador Sondland said in the boardroom.
So as early as July 10, the president's lawyers had knowledge that there was at least concern by a presidential employee about a linkage. Is that right?
That's correct.
Dr. Hill, just like you, we are trying to account for all the president's men. You had that same concern when you saw Mr. Sondland's emails and you saw people who were outside the channels that you had been working on. So I want to walk you through something you told us earlier. You said that you have evidence that as recently as this year, President Trump believes someone named Cash was the Ukraine director. Is that right?
It's not really evidence, and look, I want to be very clear about this. I was asked a question about this in my deposition. I did not raise it, and to be honest, I was surprised that I was asked the question.
But you heard that.
Well, what are you doing?
Cash,
Aren't you supposed to be in school?
I did, but again, it was in passing, and I explained the circumstances in which this came up. But I was asked a question in the course of my deposition about it.
And the only person at the time who worked at the National Security Council was Kash Patel. Is that right?
It was the only person that I could think of.
And Kash Patel, prior to working for the National Security Council from 2017 to 2018, worked for Ranking Member Nunes. Is that right?
I actually only
You
found
don't
that
have any
out
other
after
sort
the
of coming
fact.
home soon, or
Because I wondered why I
what's
was
the
being
plan?
asked about him, so I went to look this up.
And Dr. Hill, you cautioned us on the dangers of members of this committee, perhaps
watch your dad kick
peddling
ass.
any Ukrainian conspiracy theories that could benefit Russia. And I want to ask you if you have heard the name Lev Parnas of Ukraine, someone in this investigation who was influencing President Trump and Rudy Giuliani about some of the debunked conspiracy theories you referenced earlier.
I have heard his name, yes.
Are you aware that Mr. Parnas was indicted on October 10 for making foreign contributions to Republicans in U.S. elections?
I am aware of those reports, yes.
Are you aware of yesterday's
Somebody's
Daily
gonna drive
Beast
all over your
story
school?
reporting the indicted Ukrainian
What is
Lev
that?
Parnas has been working with Ranking Member Devin Nunes on Mr. Nunes' overseas investigations?
I am not aware of that.
Mr. Chairman, I asked unanimous consent to put into the record the Daily Beast story Lev Parnas helped Rev Devin Nunes' investigations. From yesterday, first two paragraphs reading, Lev Parnas, an indicted associate of Rudy Giuliani, helped arrange meetings and calls in Europe for Rep. Devin Nunes in 2018.
So you're gonna sit and
Parnas'
wait till
lawyer,
then?
Ed
What
McMahon,
time
told
is
the
it right
Daily
now?
Beast.
I don't even know.
Nunes' aide, Derek Harvey, participated in the meetings, the lawyer said, which
That's
were
what's
arranged to
playing
help
the political
Nunes'
stuff.
investigative work. McMahon didn't specify what those investigations entail. Without objection. Mr. Chairman, you have been falsely accused throughout these proceedings by the ranking member as being a quote-unquote fact witness. Now, if this story is correct, the ranking member may have actually been projecting. And in fact,
So what are you gonna do,
he
like
may
go to the
be
library
the fact
and
witness if he is working with
study or
indicted
do some
individuals
homework,
around
or
our
what's the plan?
investigation. But I want to go to what this is really all about.
You run the
First,
neighborhood
it's your
and
credibility, Mr. Holmes.
start your own
And can you
game.
tell us and confirm that in 2014 you received the William Rivkin Constructive Dissent Award from the Obama administration State Department?
Yes, sir.
And that was for dissent that you brought up against an administration policy. Is that right?
That's right.
Congratulations, and thank you for speaking up in the way that you did. But what we're really here about is what you're working on in Ukraine. I want you to take a look at the picture. Who do you see in the foreground of that photo?
President
I don't
Zelensky.
know.
That's a photograph in May 2019, where newly elected President Zelensky visited the Luhansk region in eastern Ukraine. It was his first visit to the front lines
Game's
of
taking forever
Donbass
to load.
as president. Can you just tell tax-paying Americans why it's so important that our hard-earned tax-paying dollars help President Zelensky and the men standing beside him fight against Russia in this hot war?
Absolutely, sir. President Zelensky was elected on an
So
overwhelming
share my
majority
channel and try to get other people
to defend
watch
Ukrainian
if you're
interests.
bored.
This is at a time when Ukrainians are defending their sovereignty, their territorial integrity on Ukrainian soil from Russian-backed soldiers who are attacking them. As I said, 14,000 Ukrainian lives lost in this war so far, as I mentioned already. And this is a hot war. This is not a frozen conflict. People are shooting at each other and dying every single week. And despite the trying to pursue peace. President Zelensky, even right now, is trying to pursue a summit meeting with President Putin in order to try to bring this war to conclusion so that they can move on with all the difficult things they need to do in terms of building the economy and reforming the judiciary and whatnot. And I want to add just one other thing, sir, if I may. Mr. Turner had suggested earlier that it somehow embarrassed President Zelensky. I have the deepest respect for President Zelensky. Right. This is a guy of Jewish background from a post-Soviet industrial suburb in southern Ukraine, who made himself one of the most popular entertainers in the country and somehow got elected president, and he's not going to miss that opportunity. This is a Ukrainian patriot. This is a tough guy, and frankly, he withstood a lot of pressure for a very long time, and he didn't give that interview. I have the deepest respect for him. The Ukrainian people also have the deepest respect for him. They've chosen him to help deliver the full measure of promise of their revolution of dignity, and I think he merits all of our respect.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter the May 27th photograph depicted on the screen.
The blood has been spilled.
Damn, that sucks.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes, for years of service to this country, and I appreciate y'all being here today. Throughout this process, I have said that we want to get the facts so we can get to the truth. So why are we here? Because of two things that occurred during the President's July 25th phone call with Ukrainian President. Using the phrase, do us a favor, though, in reference to the 2016 presidential election and the mention of the word Biden. I believe both statements were misguided foreign policy, and it's certainly not how the executive, current or in the future, should handle such a call. Over the course of these hearings, the American people have learned about a series of events that, in my view, have undermined our national security and undercut Ukraine, a key partner on the front lines against Russian aggression. We've heard of U.S. officials carrying
no one escapes my sight.
Conflicting messages that created doubt and uncertainty in Kyiv at a time when a new administration has just taken office and was ready to fight corruption and work with us to advance our U.S. objectives. I disagree with this sort of bungling policy. Through these hearings, many of my colleagues have unwittingly undermined the Ukrainian government by suggesting that it is subservient to the United States, and without the United States, they wouldn't be able to function. The Ukrainians, as you stated, Mr. Holmes, is in a hot war with Russia, and they are holding their own. We could benefit from the experience of the Ukrainians. While I thought the Intelligence Committee would actually be engaged in oversight of the intelligence and national security communities, unfortunately, we are not. We're here and talking about one of the most serious constitutional duties we have as members of Congress, the impeachment and removal of the President of the United States. For the past weeks, we've learned a few things. The officials on the July 25th call have many different opinions on whether the law was concerning or not. And just because Vice President Biden is the president does not mean that corruption is Ukraine's largest natural gas company and Americans' ties to it are not concerned. There's also a lot we do not know. We've not heard from Rudy Giuliani. We haven't heard from Hunter Biden. I'd like to know more about both of their activities, why they talk to Despite promises from Chairman Schiff, we have also not heard from the whistleblower. Something that can occur in a closed setting without violating his or her anonymity. We need to understand the motivations and level of coordination that happened prior to his or her submission of the complaint. For the past few weeks, and even today, it's been reiterated. In 2017, the Trump administration made the decision to provide lethal defensive aid to Ukraine after the Obama administration refused to do so. Ukraine is receiving all the security assistance as directed by Congress. President Zelensky has undertaken significant anti-corruption efforts, including eliminating the parliamentary immunity for prosecution, and, again, Mr. Holmes, you mentioned this today, under President Zelensky's leadership, we have finally seen some progress this fall towards ending the Russian occupation of Ukraine. An impeachable offense should be compelling, overwhelmingly clear, and unambiguous, and it's not something to be rushed or taken lightly. I've not heard evidence proving the president committed bribery or extortion. I also reject the notion that
my enemies will burn in the fires of my assault.
Foreign policy choices we have been hearing about over these last few weeks. To paraphrase Tim Morrison, his testimony this week, every day the national conversation on Ukraine is focused on impeachment, not the conflict in the Donbass, not the illegal occupation of Crimea, not the need for reforms in Ukraine's government economy. It's a day where we are not focused on our shared national security interests with Kyiv. I hope that we won't let this very partisan process keep us from agreeing on how a free and prosperous Ukraine is going to secure Ukrainian people, the United States of America, and the rest of the world. Mr. Chairman, before I yield back
Your
my
team
time,
did
I
something.
make a statement for the record that has this committee been given proper notice as required by House Rule 11, Clause 2G3.
I like the way you press them buttons, boy. And so, our hero story begins.
I would have voted no on the committee's first motion to table during last night's impromptu meeting. And I yield back.
Mr. Castro.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, both of you, for your testimony today. I first want to say, because I think it shouldn't go unmentioned, that the characterization just a few minutes ago by one of my Republican colleagues of this proceeding, I think, was vile, irresponsible, and dangerous. And I want to remind us why we're here. Because somebody in government, a whistleblower, felt that it was important enough to get other people's in government's attention that the president may have committed a wrong act. We have now heard and seen substantial evidence that the president, in fact, tried to trade a political favor for official government resources. The most damning words come from no one else but the president himself on that phone call with the Ukrainian president, where he asked for a favor. He mentions investigations, he mentions the Bidens, and Burisma. However,
an enemy has been slain.
Mr. Holmes also overheard the president speaking to his hand-picked ambassador, Ambassador Sondland, about investigations. Mr. Holmes has also said that in the office, everybody knew that there was an investigation. The president wanted an investigation of the Bidens. In addition, although Mick Mulvaney and Rudy Giuliani have not come before this committee, Mick Mulvaney and Rudy Giuliani have spoken publicly on the issue of investigations. Mick Mulvaney, the president's chief of staff, the person who usually works with the president the most, day in and day out, went in front of the White House press corps and basically admitted that an investigation had something to do with holding up the aid, and that this process was politicized. Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal lawyer, also essentially admitted that these investigations were an issue.
Back.
He said that he did nothing wrong because he was working at the direction of the president. So we have seen substantial evidence and heard substantial evidence wrongdoing by the President of the United States. And this Congress will have to continue to take up this very important issue for the American people. Well, my concern today is also, I feel as though the cancer of wrongdoing may spread beyond the President and into others in the executive branch. And I want to ask you a few questions about that. Before I do, I'd like Chairman to enter
Rampage.
2 articles into the record, if I could. One of them is headline, After
All right,
Boost from
so
Perry,
you died.
Packers got huge gas deal in Ukraine. The other one is titled,
Your team did
Federal
something.
prosecutors probe Giuliani's links to Ukrainian energy projects.
I can speak louder.
Mr. Holmes,
I'm not saying
thank you,
much.
Chair. You
Just wondering how the
indicated
picture
that
was.
Secretary Perry, when he was in Ukraine, had private meetings with Ukrainians. Before he had those private meetings, in a meeting with others, including yourself, I believe, he had presented a list of American advisors for the Ukraine energy sector. Do you know who was on that list?
Sir, I didn't see the names on the list myself.
Do you know if Alex Cranberg and Michael Blazer were on that list?
I have since heard that Michael Blazer was the Earth.
Was it before Secretary Perry did this? We also heard in testimony before that Ambassador Sondland also had a private meeting with somebody. How unusual was it before these guys showed up for for folks, diplomats, so to speak, or U.S. government officials to have private meetings where they insist that nobody else be in the room.
Why can't you be more like your ally?
Very rare, almost never.
Okay.
I bet he saw that going
And
differently.
I want to ask you also about the precedent that we set. Both of you. I know you're here as fact witnesses, but you're also public servants for this country. The precedent that this Congress would set, putting aside Donald Trump for a second.
Your
If
team
the
did
Congress
something.
allows a president of the United States, now or later,
My
to ask
finest creation.
a foreign government, head of state, to investigate a political rival, what precedent does that set for American diplomacy, for the safety of Americans overseas, and for the future of our country?
It's a very bad precedent.
Very bad precedent, and going forward, if that were ever the case, I would raise objections.
Thank you both. I yield back to you.
I have you now.
Nice try. Recognize my colleague, yield to my
An
colleague.
enemy has been slain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hill, I don't think there's a lot of questions that one of Putin's primary objectives within the United States is to foment unrest within our nation, to cause us to have
Couldn't have forged it better
lose
myself.
confidence in our elections, the results of elections, those kind of things. There is tension, though, in conducting our businesses the way we should, and playing into Putin's hands. As an example, while I disagree with what we're doing here today, it's under our Constitution, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle believe that they are functioning under that Constitution. These hearings, this issue is very divisive within our country, and is continuing to push that way. I think that plays into Putin's hands inadvertently. There's nothing we can do about that. But there are certain things we can do as individuals that play into his hands, and one of them would be that the loser in the 2016 election has for 3 years continued
I don't know if I can do this one by
argue
myself. I'm
that
gonna
because
try.
she won the popular vote, and she and her friends won the popular vote, that somehow the election was inappropriate, and that we shouldn't trust it, that the Electoral College victory, which was resounding, shouldn't be trusted.
Damn
Does
it,
that
didn't
help
leave in time either.
or like for us to do that? There are elections.
Killing spree.
Yes, it does.
I don't know what I expected.
RT, Putin's, would you agree with me that RT is Putin's propaganda machine here in the United States?
I would agree with you, yes.
So is it appropriate for the RT to be used to affect public policy in our nation? As an example, there have been a long series of advertisements or programs on RT.
Your middle tower is under
fracking,
attack.
that saying that's bad and trying to affect public policy in the United States. Is that appropriate use, or is that should be paying attention to that?
In the sense that Americans should be paying attention that RT and other outlets are used to propagate this kind of information, absolutely. I wasn't quite sure what you meant about
fracking is a controversial issue in the nation. If we did away with fracking, the United States would not be in a position today to dominate the oil production within the world, and would play into strengthening Putin's hands with respect to...
That's correct. And actually, I'd like to point out that in 2011, in November 2011, I actually sat next to Vladimir Putin at a conference in which he made precisely that point. It was the first time that he had actually done so.
Why can't you be more like your ally?
So we started in 2011 making it very clear that he saw American fracking as a great threat to Russian interests. We were all struck by how much he stressed this issue, and it's since 2011, since that particular juncture, that Putin has made a big deal of this.
So they said that Americans pay attention to RT and are misguided by whatever propaganda he's going. It's not in the nation's best interest. Mr. Holmes,
Silly ally. Death is for enemies.
You're privileged to upload stuff, official things that are best kept between you and the official folks that you deal with. Is there an expectation among the principles that you represent that you will exercise some discretion in what you share with others about what goes on? Yes, sir.
Your team did something.
You made the well. First off, we had a hard time pinning down the number of people that you've actually had this conversation with about the conversation that you overheard. Now,
this must be how your parents feel. Be aside.
What it's done, but we couldn't figure out how many people you actually shared that information with, and I would argue that the information is unflattering to the president, unflattering to the ambassador, and that your discretion is at odds here. I mean, your testimony or your deposition said you shared that with folks who you thought would find it interesting. I'd argue that everyone on the back row would find it interesting, but I don't know that that's necessarily the criterion. So on a go-forward basis, can you articulate that in the future, when you're privileged to certain circumstances,
why can't you be more like your ally?
That if it's official that you share with the ambassador, that's fine. But the folks outside the embassy or folks even within the embassy that don't have a need to know, that you wouldn't regale them with
an ally has been slain.
Please. Having that conversation over.
No. You're well.
That's the
my stint.
Second thing is,
Excuse me, Mr. Holmes. Let me clarify the question. Mr. Holmes. The question wasn't. Excuse me, special.
Let him answer your question, sir.
It's my question. You're exactly right, and I get to clarify my question to get the answer. And I'm hopeful I get it in a few more seconds because of the interruption from the chairman. His patience is growing thin. I was working hard not to irritate him again, but I failed again. This is you, Mr. Holmes. Your discretion. Gordon Holmes did not. Gordon Sunderland did not expect him privacy. You're going to be in rooms for maybe room 17 years where people trust when you put on that room and left. You kept it in your channels. You didn't share all that information with other folks. I'm just asking you to argue for your behalf that interesting is not some sort of a criterion that you would use when you share information from meetings. Simple, straightforward question.
Sir, I shared the information that I needed to share with the right people who needed to know it. I did not share any information people didn't need to know.
But you did use the word interesting.
It certainly was interesting, sir. And I would also hate to think that what I brought before this process, I shouldn't have done that. I've come here because you subpoenaed me to share what I know, and I've done that.
You were cut off when you were talking about Mr. Sondland's indiscretion. Did you want to finish that answer?
I think...
Mr. Chairman, that's patently unfair. Mr. Conaway, for this entire investigation.
Mr. Conaway, to interrupt the witnesses as you have done repeatedly.
Well, but you're certainly willing to interrupt me under my 5 minutes. You're the only person on this dais has
an enemy has been slain.
Absolutely unlimited time. You're the only one that has abused that power, and you continue
I don't know what I expected.
We allow the witnesses to answer the question, even if those asking the question don't want to hear the answer. Mr. Heck, you are
Double
as
kill.
well.
Mr. Holmes, much is debate about the use of regular, irregular.
Sound like a bunch of children,
Our
don't
hero
they?
story begins. They're all
Presidents
dead,
have on
and I
occasion used
feel
irregular
nothing.
channels. Would you generally agree?
Yes, sir.
And my reading of history is that, generally speaking, however, those irregular channels have either been closely coordinated with the regular ones,
Your
or at
middle
least
tower
in
is under
furtherance of
attack.
American foreign policy and our national security interest. Would you agree?
That's right, sir.
And do you believe, sir, that Mr.
Your
Giuliani's
middle tower
efforts
has
were
been
closely
destroyed.
coordinated with the regular channels, such as the ambassador to the Ukraine?
No, they weren't.
I
And were
gained.
they in furtherance of the American foreign policy as you understood it?
No, sir.
Mr. Holmes, if left unchecked,
My
Ukraine
finest
aggression
creation.
would either by means of force or other malign means subjugate Ukraine, attempt to render it a client state, if not occupy it.
Absolutely,
Why
sir.
can't
It's been
you
said
be
that-
more like your
that,
ally?
Without Ukraine, Russia's just a country. With it, it's an empire.
I feel like I've been treated to a gap fire of
My finest
the last couple of weeks, and it reminds me of that old expression about the big lie. If you tell it often enough and keep repeating it, the people will come to believe it. I think we've been subjected to
Just
some of
something
that.
I whipped up.
Here's a sample. The president didn't solicit campaign assistance from Ukraine.
A killing spree. 2 for 1. What a bargain.
The president didn't withhold vital military assistance in furtherance of his objective to obtain that campaign assistance. Yes, he did.
Unlike his victims, our hero was destined.
Just
I
on
like
his
the
own,
part where they
kind
all
of as a
died.
rogue. No, he wasn't. That all this is business as usual. This happens all the time and stems from a principled interest. No, it isn't, and no, it wasn't. And that it's okay to attack patriotic diplomats in public service if they stand in your way and have the courage to speak up.
Your middle phoenix is under attack.
Those are just some of the big lies. But here's the big truth. The president did it. He did it. We all just came from the floor.
Just something I whipped up.
And it's a majestic
Defend
chamber.
middle
In front of the
lane.
chamber, there are only two portraits. On the left looking forward is my favorite president, George Washington. And on the right is the Marquis de Lafayette, who came to this country to help us stand up our fledgling democracy. So here's another big truth. Without his help, we probably never would have gotten off the ground. And that assistance from many other countries who are helping us to create something that had never been. It was an audacious idea. This notion of a democracy, of self-governance, of freedoms such as speech and press and religion and expression and assembly, and most of all, that it would be rooted in the premise of the rule of law. Not monarchs, not military strongmen.
People die when they're
The
killed.
rule of law. Others helped us to get here, and we wouldn't be here without them. And I frankly feel like we're almost in a little bit of a pay it forward moment. So when the president did it, he put at risk the security,
This must be how your parents feel.
the strategic ally,
Your middle Phoenix is under
and a
attack.
nascent democracy with their masses yearning to breathe free. It was 6 years ago this day when their government said we're not going to sign that memorandum of agreement with the European Union,
Your
rose
middle
up and
Phoenix
took to
is
the
under
streets
attack.
because they wanted, frankly, what we have. And when the president did it, he put our own national security at risk. But what he did, most importantly, was put at risk that idea that makes us exceptional. Because I do believe America is truly exceptional. We are a country rooted in something that nobody has ever tried before. Rule of law. He put that at risk when he did what he did. The president did it. And the only question that remains is,
Just something
what
I
will
whipped
we
up.
do? I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hill, during your deposition, I asked you, was Christopher Steele's dossier a rabbit hole?
My finest creation.
The answer you gave me.
Yes, I thought it was.
Yeah, and you also said a couple of pages later in the deposition, the transcript that I have here of your deposition,
What a rude dude.
that you thought he got played. Is that fair?
That is fair, yes.
I was struck by a number of things you said in your statement, a number of things I thought were right on the target. One was on page 7. You said this: President Putin and the Russian security services weaponize our own political opposition research. And that is exactly what happened in 2016. Exactly what happened. You called it, you knew it, you saw it. The DNC hired
Our
Perkins
hero
Coie,
was celebrated,
hired Fusion
inspiring
GPS,
his...
Your
hired
middle
Christopher
Phoenix
Steele,
is under attack.
talked to Russians, who gave him a bunch of dirt,
Your
bunch of
middle
National
Phoenix
Enquirer
has been
garbage
destroyed.
that he compiled in a dossier,
My
and our
finest
FBI
creation.
used it.
Just something I
They
under
used
attack.
it as part of their investigation that they opened in July of 2016, where they spied on 2 American citizens associated with the presidential campaign. My guess is that's probably never happened in American history, and exactly what Dr. Hill talked about is what happened in 2016. Exactly what she talked about. And for 10 months, Jim Comey and his team did an investigation. And after 10 months, they had nothing. Because we deposed Mr. Comey, and he told us, after 10 months, we didn't have a thing. That didn't matter. That didn't matter. Got the Mueller investigation. $32 million, 19 lawyers, 40 FBI agents, 500 search warrants, 2,800 subpoenas, and they came back this spring, and what they tell us? No collusion, no conspiracy, no coordination. The guys on the other side don't care. They don't care. They're doing what? Dr. Hill said a number of important things in her opening statement. They're doing exactly what Dr. Hill talked about. The impact of a successful 2016 Russian campaign remains evident today. Our nation is being torn apart. Torn apart. I've never seen it this divided. It is not healthy. It is not healthy for our culture, our country, not healthy for our nation, but that's what these guys are doing. No conspiracy, no coordination, no collusion. They don't care. Now, this whole impeachment thing, witness said yesterday, without an announcement from Zelensky,
Why can't you be more like your ally? Okay, no one's that impressed. Our hero had done it. He had beaten Smite. Well done, hero.
They got the call, they got the meeting, they got the
You'll never say
Silly allies. Death is for enemies.
Cancel that. Something to the Judiciary Committee, and the process is going to go forward, and there'll be a trial in the Senate, all based on some anonymous whistleblower who came forward with no personal
Kill. Cancel that.
Worked with Joe Biden. Now all this. What a kill. Dr. Hill's right. She said it. We got to stop this. But they're not going to. They're doing it all 11 and a half months before the next election. And I think maybe the most telling thing is what the Speaker of the House said Sunday. Speaker of the House said Sunday. This is scary. Speaker of the House said Sunday. National